Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The View from 4 Feet and 3 Inches. I'm your host, Cassidy Huff, and today I am sitting on my gray couch. First, I'll describe myself as a person. I'm a white woman with blonde hair that is currently up in a claw clip. I am wearing a tie-dye, like blue, purple, and pink tie-dye shirt. In the middle of the shirt, there's a cartoon picture or cartoon graphic, I guess you would call it, of my service dog Champ encased in a pink heart. I am sitting in my living room. I have a pink microphone in front of me. I am sitting on a gray couch with those couch pillows, or like chair pillows, the ones that like have like a back and like armrests like a chair. I don't really know how else to explain it. I don't know if I like this, but I guess we'll see. My background is blurred because there's chaos in the background. Anyways, so welcome back. It is episode 11, I believe, and I'm really excited to be here. I feel like I haven't recorded in literally forever when it's only been like a week. And I'm recording early. I'm not recording this the night before, so that's pretty good. It's because I have plans tomorrow, which is Saturday, but I'll take what I can get. So, today I'm going to be talking about like what my disability actually is, because I've talked about it a few times before. I've talked about it on different platforms and whatever, but I don't feel like I've actually gone into detail about it in a podcast format. So that's what I'm gonna do today. I'm gonna be talking about like not only what my disability is, but also how it's kind of evolved, how I've gotten other disabilities, not just the ones I was born with. And here we go. So, what is my disability? So, it's called Conradi-Huterman syndrome. It is a rare form of dwarfism that affects everything in my body. So, for starters, it's a form of dwarfism, obviously. So, I am small. I'm very small compared to other people my age. I stand at about 4 feet and 3 inches tall. So I'm not average height at all. I am also, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I also have kyphoscoliosis, which is kyphosis and scoliosis mixed, basically. So my spine bends on two different planes. It bends in an S shape and a C shape. So without medical intervention, it will crush my internal organs, which was a really fun time for me. I have a skin condition called ichthyosis. I have another skin condition called patchy alopecia. I have a condition called proximal femoral focal deficiency, which basically means my femur didn't form completely in the womb. So I don't have a full hip joint. So I have a limb discrepancy. So my legs are two different lengths. And the difference between my legs, my right leg is about 5.5 inches ish shorter than my left leg. So I wear a foot on foot orthotic prosthesis. I have a lot of, mobility issues due to my spine and my hip issues. So I am an ambulatory wheelchair user. I'm a service dog user. I'm also blind in my right eye and deaf in my left ear. There's a lot of things going on. So, let's start with what I was born with. So I was born with Conradi-Huterman syndrome, and my mom actually tests positive for the syndrome. So that's really interesting. She has a very, very minor form of it, but she still tests positive. She has a limb discrepancy, a very minor one. I think it's like 1/2 inch or an inch. And then she was diagnosed with scoliosis as a kid, so she had a spinal fusion. But she's only ever had one surgery and didn't really have a relationship with disability before me. I did an episode with her on this podcast a few episodes back. So if you want to hear about her perspective raising me and whatever, go check that out. I found it really interesting. I learned a lot from my mom during that episode, and it was just a really interesting thing to film overall. It's like almost an hour long, but I thought it was a really cool thing to film. So that's what I was born with. So I was born with the no femur. I didn't know how else to say that. I have a femur. It's just not fully formed. So I was born with that part. I was born with the skin conditions. I was not born blind out of my right eye. I was born half deaf, but they did not figure that out until much later. So when I was born, you can hear my whole birth story from my mom's point of view because I was there, but obviously I don't remember anything. But long story short, they did some testing, and also a specialist came in and basically told my mom that all I would ever be good for was a dwarf in a circus, and that caused social media, caused an uproar, I will say. People were like, there's no way this happened, that's not how this happened, and it did happen, I guarantee you. And the thing I found so interesting about that is that so many parents in the comments were sharing very similar stories, and also so many conversations that we've had with people who have seen that specific specialist that saw me when I was born say that they were treated the same way. So I don't know. Like, I believe my mom, obviously, because she's my mom, but also just because the evidence is undeniable. And it's just really interesting that there were thousands of comments being like, don't make stuff up, like, she's lying, and all this other stuff. And I was like, whoa, I did not realize it was gonna get to that side of the internet, but it did. Oh well. So that's what happened when I was born. I went to Seattle Children's Hospital when I was 3 months old. That's when I started going there. And they knew what my condition was because the specialist that saw me at birth didn't really understand what it was. He thought he knew what the situation was, but he knew it was a type of dwarfism, but he didn't know what kind it was. So when I started going to Seattle Children's, that's when they officially diagnosed me with Conradi-Hunerman syndrome. It's very, very rare. Only about 150 people have it worldwide. So it was pretty unknown at the time, and there was no research on the condition at all. So they were basically just treating the symptoms of it because they didn't know what all came with the syndrome because there was no research on it. So the biggest and most pressing issue at the time when I was an infant was my spine, because again, without medical intervention, my spine was going to curl in on itself and crush my internal organs. So they needed to fix that pretty immediately. So when I was 1 year old, I went in for my first surgery, and again, I'm going based off of everything I was told. I don't remember any of this. So when I was 1, I went in for my first surgery, and my first surgery, I believe, was tissue expanders. So basically, it's to stretch the skin so that they have enough skin to do whatever surgery that they need to do. And because I was so small, my skin, there wasn't enough of it. So they had to go and stretch it, basically. And then I believe they also put my rods in my back, 2 rods in my back during that surgery as well. And that was the surgery that started it all, honestly. So what happened with that was they put 1 rod on either side of my spine, basically. And every 6 months after that, they would have to go and lengthen it manually, lengthen both of the rods. And they were titanium expandable rods. They would go in and they would lengthen them about 1/2 inch-ish so that I could grow. So they were basically manually giving me growth spurts, which is kind of crazy to think about. But they were doing this so that they were keeping my spine straight, but also allowing my body to grow at the same time. So that's kind of wild when you think about it. So that's why my arms and my legs are so long, because my arms and my legs got the memo to grow, but my spine needed to be manually lengthened, basically. So it's a really interesting thing to think about. So I had surgeries every 6 months from the age of 1 to the age of 18. Now, I was only supposed to have surgeries every 6 months from the age of 1 to the age of 13. that didn't happen, and I'll tell you why. So every 6 months they would go in, they would lengthen them, they would lengthen my spine. I was part of the FDA trial of expandable titanium rods in children. And so I was one of the first kids that like was experimented on, like a guinea pig, pretty much. Now they don't do that surgery at all, to my knowledge. Now, from what I've seen, they're using magnetic rods, where it's like an outpatient procedure. They have one surgery where you're inpatient and they put the rods in, and then every 6 months after that, it's an outpatient procedure where they lengthen them with magnets, and you get super tired after it. But other than that, like, you're not in the hospital for days and days like I was. So every 6 months, that's a lot for a small body, or any body, I guess, to go through. And so I had a lot of complications because of that. They were very worried about my skin specifically because, the scar tissue, and you're going into the same thing every single time, twice a year. Like, that's a lot of surgery. So I dealt with my fair share of like scary experiences. I dealt with my lungs collapsed a few times. I also have restrictive lung disease. I don't think I mentioned that, but basically it's like asthma, but worse. I don't want to like compare disabilities, but that's how it was explained to me. So I get out of breath really easily. Walking and talking is really difficult for me. I also have temperature regulation issues, etc. So I went in every 6 months for surgery, and that was a lot for my small body to handle. So I dealt with my fair share of complications. I dealt with my fair share of not being able to keep weight on or put weight on. So that was a big conversation throughout my childhood of like, I had to be on a high calorie diet for years, and I had to drink these really disgusting shakes every day, and they were just trying to make me gain weight. So that I didn't have to have a feeding tube, because that's another surgery and more medical intervention. So they were trying to keep me out of the hospital as much as possible because I was just there all the time. So because I'm going in for surgery every 6 months, but that does not account for the time that I am going in for appointments, because you have to see pulmonology for your lungs, and you have to see dermatology for your skin, and you have to see orthopedics for your spine and your hip issues, and on and on and on, right? So that's like at least 3 different departments that I was seeing, and all of them have different times that I come in and have appointments. We tried to schedule them all on the same day, but sometimes that didn't work. So I went to the hospital a lot. I was missing a lot of school because I was constantly in and out of the hospital, whether it was for surgery or appointments. So it was a very complex, very medically complex case. There are cars outside my window. I apologize. I'm not going to pause because I don't want to edit this. So that's a little bit about my childhood. Now, that was early childhood. So when I was about 3 or 3.5, they noticed that I couldn't hear. And the way they figured this out was because I was going to preschool at the time, and they were like, she's just imaginative. Like, she's not listening. She's not following directions, and she cannot follow directions to save her life. Well, that wasn't the case. The case was that I could not hear directions being said. So they finally got my hearing checked, because my mom was like, that does not sound like my kid. Like, I was very attentive. I loved to learn. I loved school. I loved following directions to a T. So when she heard that I was not following directions and not paying attention, she was like, that doesn't sound like her. Even when I was like 3. So they got my hearing checked. Surprise, I couldn't hear. So basically there are 2, the way I understand it, again, I might be completely wrong. I have no idea. But the way that it was explained to me was that there are 2 bones that surround your eardrum, that are on either side of your eardrum. And so, like, imagine there's an eardrum in the middle of my fingers, if you're watching. And when sound enters your ear canal, then it makes those 2 bones on either side of your eardrum vibrate, and then that bounces the sound from your eardrum off of it, and that's how, like, you hear sound. That's how you hear noise. that wasn't happening in my ear, so I could only hear out of one of my ears. So they were like, that's a problem. So they stuck a hearing aid in my ear, and there were no conversations about having me learn ASL, like American Sign Language, nothing, which I find really interesting, but that's a whole nother conversation. So I've been wearing a hearing aid since I was that young, like 3 or 3.5. The other thing was my sight. So they checked my sight regularly. However, they noticed that there was a cataract in my right eye. With my syndrome, we are more prone to cataracts, which we know now. We did not know at the time. So I had a cataract out of my right eye, and they caught it too late. And so when they went to put a lens over it, to fix the problem, which is a very standard procedure, the first time they broke the lens before it even entered my eye. So then they had to close me up, stitch me up, schedule another surgery for like 2 or 3 weeks later or whatever it was, and then open me back up again, open my eye up, and place the lens again. But because I don't really know what happened in the surgery in the OR, but they messed up and they scratched my cornea really, really badly. And that sucked. Apparently it hurt really bad. I don't know why I said it like that. Apparently it hurt really bad. And after surgery, I would not open my eye. And so they were really concerned about that. But turns out they caught the cataract too late. So I can't see. They caught the cataract too late, and so that means that my vision wasn't fully formed. So they did what they could do. They removed the cataract and put a lens in, but because of surgery complications and how long it took my eye to heal from that surgery, and the fact that they caught the cataract a few years too late, I can't see out of my right eye because my vision never fully formed the way it was supposed to. So I'm blind out of my right eye and deaf out of my left ear. I was born deaf. I was not born blind. Cool. So with surgeries, I'm checking my notes here to make sure that I have. Oh yes, this is why I have notes. I was also in and out of physical therapy all the time, and so, they wanted to make sure that like I knew how to move my body and my body was moving the way it was supposed to as much as it could, I guess. And I was hitting milestones. When I was born, I forgot to say this earlier, but when I was born, they basically said that I would never, the specialist that I saw, said that I would never walk, talk, eat on my own, live on my own, etc., etc. Basically, I would never do anything. And my mom was like, okay, that's okay if she doesn't do those things. But I really don't feel like she won't do those things. Like, I feel like she's going to live a normal or like normal to her life. And so I walked really late. I learned how to walk really late. I also didn't crawl correctly. I army crawled. So I wasn't meeting the milestones at the times that I was supposed to. Like, my mom would be like, oh my gosh, she's crawling. And I was army crawling, and they would take me in to like show the doctors that I was crawling, and they'd be like, she's technically not, so that's not a milestone she's meeting. Those kinds of things. I didn't walk until I was like 3, because of the limb difference. It's very difficult to walk when both of your legs are different lengths. And now I got it down, but learning how to walk was a whole different story. So I went to physical therapy a lot. I wasn't meeting the milestones at the times that I was supposed to be, but I did meet all of those milestones. And I was a very independent kid. Like, I know a lot of kids are like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to tie my shoes. I'm going to walk by myself. Those kinds of things. I was that times 30. Like, I was just determined to do everything by myself, even if that was not a good idea. So I just remember, like, being told no when I was a child and being like, oh yeah, you're going to tell me no? Great, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it better than you ever could, kind of thing. And so I still have that attitude, and sometimes it does not serve me, and sometimes it does. So I had my first surgery at 1. I had surgeries every 6 months from the age of 1 to 18. And I was supposed to stop at the age of 13. That's when surgeries were supposed to stop. So when I was 13, I was placed in a halo traction, which basically means that there are 8 pins screwed into your head, literally screwed into your skull. That's why I have scars around my forehead. A lot of people either don't notice them or think that they're like from the chicken pox or something because they kind of look like that. But no, they are from pins that were quite literally screwed into my head. And then there was like this, it looks like a medieval torture device. I don't really know how to explain it. You're going to have to go look it up. Look up, but like halo traction, but I will try my best to explain it. There's basically this, you're hooked up to traction. Like there's weight on you that's like hooked up to a device that's hooked to the pins in your skull. So it's stretching you. Ideally, it's giving your spinal cord room to stretch so that, in my case, they could go in and fuse my vertebrae. So my neck is not fused, but all of my vertebrae, I don't know the letters and numbers of the vertebrae, but all of them are from the base of my neck all the way down are completely fused. So this means that I can't twist my spine, whatever. This was supposed to be my last surgery, was my spinal fusion. I spent 52 days in the hospital undergoing halo traction because I know a lot of people are able to leave and go home when they're in halo traction. I was not, because I was a very complex case and they needed me inpatient the whole time so that they could monitor my every move, basically. Because if something was going to go wrong, I was going to be the person that it went wrong for, So they kept me inpatient for 52 days. I was only supposed to be in halo traction for 6 weeks, but I ended up getting an infection and I had a CSF leak. And so I had a cerebral spinal fluid leak. So cerebral spinal fluid was coming out of me. Basically, if you don't know what CSF is, it is the packing peanuts around your brain and your spinal cord. So when they went in to take care of the infection that I had, they accidentally made a microscopic hole in my spinal cord. Don't know how that happened. I don't think they do either, but they accidentally nicked my spinal cord, leaving a microscopic hole for cerebral spinal fluid to leak out of. So if you're squeamish or queasy at all because of medical things, you might want to stop listening for the next 10 seconds. My incisions basically were weeping cerebral spinal fluid, so it was coming out of me. Okay, everybody who's not squeamish about who is squeamish about medical things can start listening now. So they had to take care of that, and they needed to take care of that by doing another surgery that required them to put drains in so that they could drain the excess cerebral spinal fluid. Because of that leak, my body was making more cerebral spinal fluid than it needed to. So that's a problem. So in order to fix it, they basically had to drain the excess CSF so that it could drain out of me. And basically we just had to wait until the microscopic hole in my spinal cord fixed itself. So I had a lot of migraines and I had a lot of issues with my head because when your fluid in your surrounding your brain in your head is there's not enough of it or there's too much of it, it causes your head to really, really, really hurt. I've never felt pain like that in my whole life. I slept a lot. So they prescribed me caffeine pills because caffeine helps with migraines. Fun fact. Now, because of that, or ever since then, I've had chronic migraines, which is really fun. So now I drink a lot of caffeine, and it's not my fault because they started it, okay? They prescribed it, they started it. So I was in the hospital for 52 days because of that surgery. If you hear snoring in the background, that's my service dog Champ. I can't fix that, sorry. So I was in the hospital for 52 days. I finally got the halo out of me and the CSF leaks were fixed and the spinal fusion happened. I turned 14 and I was like, great, I'm never ever having another surgery ever again. Just kidding. 6 months later, I had another one because I got an infection in my hardware in my spine that was in my back because I don't even remember what happened. But basically, the skin on my back is really, really thin and paper thin. because I'm a very thin person, and I also am very there's a lot of scar tissue back there, so it's very thin. And if I do activities that cause that skin to rub against something like plastic or my fabric on my wheelchair, whatever it is, then my skin breaks down and opens up, and then all my hardware is exposed to the outside air and gets infected. So I had a few staph infections where they had to go in, open me up, clean all of the hardware out, take all of the hardware out of me that was infected, clean the rest of it, and then close me back up. That happened many, many times from the age of 13 to 18. So that happened. And that's why I had so many extra surgeries. After that, I was done. I got my first wheelchair after I turned 13, after my halo traction, I'm pretty sure, or right before it. I can't remember. One of the two. I had to wear a back brace for like 3 months after my spinal fusion. I hated that thing. Anyways, so that is a little bit of my medical history. I missed a lot of school, as you can imagine, in my formative years. Really, in all my years, I missed a lot of school because of my medical issues. So I didn't have much of a social life. I think I talked about that a little bit in the last episode, the last week. There were lots of things that I could not do. I cannot think of anything right now, but you can imagine there were a lot of things that I couldn't do. I couldn't jump on a trampoline. I couldn't do a lot of things that I saw my sister doing that I really wanted to do. However, the one thing that I could do that I loved was going to summer camp every year. And the reason is because I went to summer camps specifically for kids with disabilities, and I could do everything there. I did ropes courses and rock climbing and campfires and running around, and I could keep up with everybody, and everybody looked like me, and on and on and on. Like, it was the best weeks of my life were 100% spent at camp. I went to camp from the age of 8 to the age of 17, and I loved every single second of it. So I couldn't do a lot of things, but I could do every single thing at camp. And if you have a kid with a disability, please consider sending them to a serious fun camp. My mom and I talked about this in her episode, but my life was forever changed because of serious fun camps. And if you are, even if you are disabled, you're not a child, or you're not disabled, go volunteer at a serious fun camp. It will change your life too, I promise. This episode is not sponsored by Serious Fun, but I will talk about them forever. As far as performing went, I started performing when I was 4. I had my Make-A-Wish when I was 4, and I will do a whole separate video or a whole separate podcast episode on that. But that's what really kicked off my performing, and that's when I realized that I wanted to perform for the rest of my life, and that's what I was put on this earth to do. So I've been performing ever since. I went to college. I got my Bachelor's of Fine Arts in musical theater. I graduated last year. I love performing. I don't do it much right now, but I need to start because I that's my first love. That's where it all began for me. So, also, if you want to go check out this merch, please do that. I did not say that at the beginning of this episode. So if you want a shirt like this or this exact shirt, go to my merch shop, which is down below or in any of the links in my bios in my social media. Anyways, so this is a 30-minute episode and I'm not even done yet. I loved performing. That's like where my heart was for a long time. I started working for places like Seattle Theater Group and Seattle Repertory Theater when I was like 15, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with every aspect of theater. I did choir all throughout elementary, middle school, and high school. I did band in high school. I also did wheelchair track. I did a lot in high school. I was a cheerleader. But performing was where it was at for me. I loved to perform. I loved being on stage. I still do. And then when I was 18 and finally stopped having surgeries, COVID hit, and I will do a whole separate episode again on what graduating high school in 2020 was like, because it was horrible. In all honesty, it was not fun. So once 2020 hit, I had a slight breakdown because or 2019 to 2020, I was applying for colleges and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with my life? I know I love performing, but like, what if that's not what I was meant to do? And, silly things like that. But I was having a pre-life crisis, as I like to call it. Long story short, I went to school for performing and I loved it. But I also accidentally got involved in activism on social media. And when I was accidentally involved in activism, I learned a lot about the history of the disability rights movement and disability advocacy and what it was to be a disability rights activist and how far we have to go as a society, as a country in disability rights. And I learned so much, and I became determined to spread that education and information, because I firmly believe, and I was taught, that people are scared of disability, and usually people are scared of things when they're not educated about them. So my thought process was, if I educate people, show people how I live my life, then it removes the aspect of fear out of their brain, right? And so then they won't be as scared of disability, because disability is inevitable for everybody. And you will become disabled at some point in your life if you're not already, whether it's by an accident, whether it's by old age, whatever it is, you are going to become disabled. I hate to be the one to tell you that, but it's true. And so I was like, well, there's no point in being scared of something that like is going to happen to you. So I would rather people be educated and have the resources now, so that when they do hit that point in their life, they're not as panicked as they would have been if they weren't educated about this. So I started educating via social media, which turned into something much bigger, which now has turned into me being in politics somehow. Go check out Disabled Voters for Harris if you haven't. But yeah, I am now the co-founder and executive director of Disabled Voters for Harris. And I did not in a million years think that I would be a disability activist, much less in politics. That was never somewhere that I thought my life would go, or like a direction I thought I would go in. But here we are. And I could not ask for a better platform. I could not ask for a better audience. And truthfully, my entire life has been proving that specialist who told my mom that I would never walk, talk, eat on my own, anything, that I would never do anything, really. My entire life has been dedicated to proving that person wrong. But it's so much more than that. It's educating people. I believe that I was put on this earth to educate others. And so that's what I've been doing for the last at least I really have been doing that my whole life. Anytime I go into any kind of medical setting, I'm educating people. Anytime I go out in public, I'm educating people. Anytime anybody sees a video of mine, I'm educating people. So that's my entire life, is educating others on not only my story, but so many other people's stories and facts about how our society is being run right now, how our country is being run right now, and how I would like to see it change for the better. And I want people to know that, like, I'm here. Disabled people are here. We deserve to be heard, listened to, seen. We deserve a seat at the table. We deserve to be in the room. And yeah, that's really what my whole life has consisted of. So yes, this episode was about what my actual disability is, which is a lot of things. But when you're talking about what my disability is, I believe it's also important to talk about what my disability is turned into. And it's turned into this educational piece that I am slowly trying to make into an empire, really. I don't want it to sound like scary, but that's really what I want to do, is like, I want to reach as many people as possible. Selfishly, yes, but also to educate as many people as possible. And if I have to do that one person at a time, that's literally what I'm going to do. Does this podcast get millions of views, millions of listeners every week? No. However, if I'm educating one new person a week or one new person a day with my short form content, then that's what I'm doing. that's what I'm gonna do. So, with all of that being said, this is a 35-minute episode of me just rambling on about my medical history. And I don't know if this was helpful at all, but I really hope it was. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow, give me a 5-star review depending on where you're watching or listening from. I make a podcast episode every week on Sundays. They are released. I also have a vlog, usually out every Wednesday on my YouTube, and I make content every single day on Instagram, YouTube Shorts, Facebook, and TikTok. So go follow me on my other platforms. Go check out my merch, which is in the link down below and or in the links in all of my bios on all of the platforms. Make sure you go check out Disabled Voters for Harris because I've been working really hard on that with my team. And I love you, and I will see you next week. Bye.